Tonight, we journey into a chilling mystery. We look into the darkness above a quiet city where a state-of-the-art aircraft lifted into the morning sky, only to vanish in less than a minute. This is the tragic story of Air India Flight 171, a modern machine, a seasoned crew, and what should have been a routine departure. Yet what unfolded became a mystery that resists a simple conclusion, leaving grief and unanswered questions. It involves a perfectly functioning aircraft flown by experienced pilots. The weather was clear and every system check returned a green light, and yet something went catastrophically wrong. The date was June 12, 2025, a day that would end etched into the annals of aviation disasters.
None of these individuals could have comprehended the chilling reality that awaited them. They were unaware that they had just under an hour left to live.
Air India Flight 171 was a regular route connecting Ahmedabad with London's Gatwick Airport. On board were 242 passengers and a crew of 18. The manifest was a diverse tapestry of humanity. The cabin was a microcosm of the world, filled with the quiet hum of conversations as people settled in for the flight, oblivious to the fact that their shared journey would be tragically cut short. In the cockpit, two highly experienced pilots were at the controls, Captain Sumit Sabharwal and First Officer Clive Kundar. Their combined experience represented tens of thousands of flight hours. The sky was clear, the machine was ready, and the crew was among the best.
The aircraft was the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, one of the most technologically advanced and safest commercial aircraft. It was a marvel of modern engineering.
At precisely 10:07 a.m. local time, Air India Flight 171, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, pushed back from its gate at Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport. Inside the flight deck, Captain Sabharwal and First Officer Kundar commenced the engine start sequence. On the pilot's displays, indicators turned green, confirming that the aircraft was healthy and ready for flight. The massive jet moved with a graceful and deliberate power. Captain Sabharwal reviewed the final takeoff data with First Officer Kundar, their actions guided by years of training and discipline. As the Dreamliner lined up on the runway, the cabin was secured for takeoff. The passengers felt the powerful engines spool up. The takeoff roll was smooth. At 10:09 a.m., the nose wheel lifted off the runway. A moment later, Flight 171 was airborne. The Boeing 787 began a steady climb into the blue sky. The fuel cutoff switches on a Boeing 787 are designed with protective guards and require a deliberate two-step action to engage. And yet, there they were, both levers inexplicably flipped, both engines starved into silence. Two highly skilled men were suddenly confronted with the one scenario for which there was no precedent. Outside the cockpit door, the passengers would have felt the change as the engines went silent. The aircraft began to sink back towards the earth. This was the moment the dream of flight turned into an inescapable nightmare. Why did you do the cutoff? The response comes back equally stunned. I didn't. But then came the unthinkable. Both of the aircraft's primary fuel control switches were flipped to the cutoff position. The pilots were instantly confronted with an emergency, one for which no training could fully prepare them.
The powerful roar faded into an unsettling silence. It seemed impossible. The initial reaction recorded is not of terror, but of profound and utter confusion.
To understand the tragedy above Ahmedabad, we must look to the people. The 242 passengers who boarded Air India Flight 171 were families embarking on holidays, students heading back to universities, and newlyweds returning home. Not far from them sat the Joshi family on their way to visit grandparents. On Flight 171, entire worlds were extinguished in an instant. It is a litany of broken families, stolen futures, and immeasurable grief. Beside Captain Sabharwal sat First Officer Clive Kundar, a bright, tech-savvy pilot and a rising star within the airline. He and Captain Sabharwal had flown together and developed a smooth professional rapport. Just weeks away from retirement, this flight to London was one of my last. The flight deck was the domain of Captain Sumit Sabharwal, a seasoned commander, and First Officer Clive Kundar. On this particular flight, I was working alongside several junior crew members.
At the heart of any flight is its crew, the dedicated professionals entrusted with the safety and comfort of every person on board. Leading the cabin crew was Purser Sunitha Nair, a woman who had dedicated over 20 years of her life to Air India. For her, this was not just a job, it was a calling.
For many on Flight 171, the journey was a pivotal moment, a bridge between chapters. The cabin held students from across India heading to British universities, London a gateway to their future. They carried the hopes of families, the culmination of years of sacrifice. Among them, Anjali, the first from her village to study abroad. Her community had funded her journey, her luggage filled with their dreams. The flight was also a vessel of reunion, expatriates returning after visiting family. An elderly couple returned after meeting their great-grandchild.
Their bags held gifts, symbols of love. These journeys connect families across distances. The sudden end meant these memories were all that remained, a profound loss.
Amidst the families and students, a significant portion of the passengers on Flight 171 were traveling for work. Ahmedabad is a major economic hub, and the direct flight to London is a vital artery for commerce, connecting Indian industry with European markets. The business class cabin was filled with executives, engineers, and entrepreneurs. They were men and women in sharp suits, their briefcases filled with contracts, presentations, and laptops that held the details of international deals. For them, the flight was, kind of like an office in the sky, a transient space to prepare for meetings, answer emails, and finalize strategies before landing in one of the world's most important financial centers. One of these passengers was a senior executive for a multinational pharmaceutical company on his way to finalize a major partnership that his team had been working on for over a year. He was a seasoned traveler, accustomed to the rigors of long-haul flights and the pressures of high-stakes negotiations. He spent the time before boarding on a conference call, his voice calm and authoritative as he confirmed the final details with his team back in Mumbai. He represented the relentless forward momentum of global business, a world that operates 24/7 across time zones. His work and the work of many others on that flight was part of the intricate machinery that drives the modern economy, a machinery that relies on the safe and predictable passage of its key players. Another group of passengers consisted of a team of textile designers from a prominent Indian fashion house. They were heading to London for a major trade show, their portfolios filled with innovative new designs that blended traditional Indian craftsmanship with contemporary aesthetics. This trip was the culmination of months of creative work, a crucial opportunity to showcase their talent on an international stage and secure orders from major European retailers. They were a young, energetic team, their conversation buzzing with creative ideas and optimistic projections for the show. Their journey was one of ambition and creativity, a mission to share a piece of their culture with the world and build their brand's global presence. Their loss was not just a personal tragedy, but also a blow to their company and the creative industry they represented. The unique designs they carried, the artistic vision they shared, vanished with them. This aspect of the tragedy highlights how interconnected our world has become. The crash of a single plane can send shockwaves through boardrooms, disrupt supply chains, and silence the voices of innovation.
For the companies who lost their employees, the process of grieving was compounded by the practical challenge of filling the void left by talented and dedicated professionals, a stark reminder of the human cost that underpins the global marketplace.
Vishwash Kumar would become the sole survivor. His presence on that flight adds a haunting poignancy to the story. In those final minutes, Flight 171 was a space of quiet anticipation. They were the last normal moments for 259 people, separating them from the world they knew and setting them on a path toward a mystery. I remember sitting down and looking at my brother. It felt just like any other flight. These were the small, mundane goodbyes, freighted with an unbearable significance only in retrospect.
This is the threshold moment of travel, the point of no return. As each passenger stepped across the jet bridge, they were placing their life into this system, confident in the promise of a safe arrival.
Captain Sabharwal eased back on the control column, and the nose of the massive Dreamliner lifted gracefully into the air. The transition from Earth to sky was flawless, a textbook execution of a routine departure that inspired confidence. The Boeing 787, a pinnacle of modern aerospace engineering, was behaving exactly as it should. In every conceivable way, it was the picture of a perfect flight in its infancy. For a few fleeting seconds, everything was normal, utterly unaware of the precipice it was about to cross.
The illusion of a perfect ascent was complete. A fragile veneer of routine that was about to be shattered in the most catastrophic and inexplicable way imaginable, turning a routine departure into a national tragedy.
On the cockpit voice recorder, the audio evidence is chilling. The pilots, grappling with the reality that contradicted their training, were momentarily paralyzed. An aircraft does not simply turn itself off. The crew was thrust into a desperate struggle against a failing aircraft. The pilots were suddenly faced with the complete and simultaneous loss of all thrust immediately after takeoff. It was a core event that struck at the aircraft's ability to even remain airborne, a crisis of the highest possible magnitude. The serene environment was instantly shattered by a cacophony of alarms announcing the dual-engine failure. A state-of-the-art jetliner was suddenly and inexplicably rendered powerless. It had been transformed into a massive, unpowered glider, a silent catastrophe initiated from within the nerve center of the aircraft itself. The engines spooled down in a terrifying and unnatural synchrony. The fuel control switches were moved to cut off, effectively sentencing the engines to death by starvation. The unthinkable happened.
This fatal dialogue offers no answers, only deeper, disturbing questions that haunt investigators and families alike. This leaves a void. Did someone act, then deny it in shock? Or did a bizarre fault bypass safeguards and move the levers?
The investigation faces an impossible contradiction. The switches moved, proven by silenced engines and flight recorder data, yet both pilots denied it in their final moments. It requires a conscious, two-part action, nearly impossible to do by accident. These sentences form the agonizing mystery. Why did you do the cutoff? A terrifying breakdown of shared reality. The other pilot's response is immediate bewilderment, a stunned, convincing denial. I didn't, he replies, voice laced with shock. The aircraft, powerless, descended relentlessly toward the city below. The pilots had only seconds, fighting physics in a battle they couldn't win. The ram air turbine deployed, a last-ditch system to keep controls alive, but it couldn't provide thrust. In the cockpit, the pilots frantically tried to restart the engines, but at just 625 feet, time was running out.
Passengers felt a sudden, sickening drop as the familiar engine hum vanished, replaced by panic and confusion. With both engines dead, Air India Flight 171 became a 200-ton glider, silently losing altitude over the city.
A perfect takeoff, a routine climb undone in seconds by an inexplicable event. The journey ended in devastation, the cause still a chilling mystery. At 10:10 a.m., just 53 seconds after takeoff, Flight 171 slammed into a neighborhood, erupting in a fireball. For passengers, it was pure terror. A violent, tumbling descent, the nose pitched down. The final dive was unstoppable. Asymmetric thrust twisted the plane, making control nearly impossible at such low altitude. The last 20 seconds were chaos. Pilots desperately flipping switches, alarms blaring, one engine briefly sputtering to life. The focus shifted from mechanical failure to a complex human or system interaction. This deepened the mystery: who or what had triggered the fatal action. Forensic analysis suggested the switches had been moved to cut off, then back to run in a desperate restart attempt. The fuel switches were in the run position, contradicting initial theories of fuel starvation. The landing gear was found retracted, confirming a normal takeoff, and a sudden crisis after liftoff. Investigators from India, the United States, and Boeing combed the wreckage, searching for clues.
The crash site was apocalyptic. Fire, smoke, and twisted metal scattered across Naroda.
The black boxes provided data but left behind an unsolvable riddle. The dialogue suggested either a pilot's unintentional action or an unrecorded external event. This bombshell shifted the investigation from mechanical failure to human factors. The CVR revealed the chilling exchange. "Why did you do the cutoff?" "I didn't." No mechanical or electrical fault explained the shutdown. The aircraft was simply switched off in mid-air. The FDR showed a normal takeoff, then both engines shutting down simultaneously at 625 feet.
Investigators recovered the black boxes, the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, intact.
The theory raised questions but didn't solve the central enigma of Flight 171. Could a latent design flaw have made accidental activation possible? A 2018 FAA bulletin warned of possible wear in the locking mechanisms, but inspections weren't mandatory. Air India hadn't checked these switches for faults. No evidence of a cockpit struggle was found on the CVR.
Investigators scrutinized the fuel cutoff switches, protected by guards, requiring a deliberate two-step action. Simulations showed accidental activation was nearly impossible.
The investigation circled back to the cockpit and the impossible dialogue captured on the CVR. They considered everything from military radar interference to a concealed electronic device. The area around the airport was surveyed, but nothing was found. The 787 is designed and shielded to withstand significant levels of electromagnetic interference. Ultimately, the search for a technical solution proved fruitless. Another investigation focused on the potential for EMI, electromagnetic interference.
Unable to reconcile the evidence with the pilot's dialogue, investigators explored unsettling possibilities. The theory of a ghost in the machine was thoroughly examined, but the digital footprint showed systems responding correctly. The ghost in the machine remained a phantom.
With technical explanations exhausted, the investigation examined the human factor. The lives of Captain Sabharwal and First Officer Kundar were scrutinized. Investigators reviewed training records, medical histories, and personal lives, searching for any sign of distress. The public leaned toward a theory of pilot suicide, but profiles offered no support. The theory of a deliberate act seemed inconsistent with the pilot's history, leaving investigators at a dead end. The investigation turned to subtle human factors. Could a momentary cognitive lapse have occurred? Ultimately, the official investigation would likely conclude with unsettling ambiguity. Without definitive fault, the probable cause would be an uncommanded dual-engine shutdown by an unknown means. For the families and the aviation community, the investigation would end with a haunting question mark. The investigation had just begun, but for these families, the final verdict was already in. The future was gone, replaced by impossible tasks. Friends gathered, lighting candles and saying the names of the lost. Confirmation that a loved one was on the passenger manifest transformed abstract fear into soul-crushing reality. Each time the news channel showed the crash site, a fresh wave of dread washed over them. This period of not knowing is a unique and profound form of suffering.
For hours, families were caught in a torturous limbo, clinging to hope. Relatives were plunged into a state of agonizing uncertainty. As the first shocking images were broadcast, a different kind of horror began to unfold.
From the heart of the inferno, against all conceivable odds, a miracle emerged. Rescue workers, battling the intense heat and hazardous debris, pulled a single living person from the wreckage of Flight 171. His name was Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, a young man who had been traveling with his brother. He was found unconscious, pinned beneath a section of the fuselage, severely injured but alive. His survival was a staggering anomaly, a 1 in a million chance that defied the catastrophic forces that claimed the lives of 259 other souls on board. He was rushed to a nearby hospital, his identity unknown at first, becoming a symbol of impossible hope amid utter devastation. When Vishwash Kumar finally regained consciousness days later, his first thoughts were of his brother. My memory of the crash was a fractured, nightmarish collage of sound and sensation. The sudden silence of the engines, the lurching feeling of the fall, a moment of intense pressure and then darkness. His first words to the doctors and his family who had rushed to his side were a repeated, desperate question. What happened to us? Where is my brother? The gentle, heartbreaking task of telling him the truth fell to his grieving parents. His brother, who had been sitting right beside him, had not survived. This devastating news plunged Vishwash Kumar into a profound state of grief and survivor's guilt, a psychological burden as heavy as his physical injuries. Why me? Why was I spared when my brother and everyone else were taken? These questions began to haunt his waking hours and torment his dreams. His miraculous survival, celebrated by the world's media as a story of hope, felt to him like a cruel curse. He was the sole witness, the only person to have lived through the final moments, yet his memory was a fog, unable to provide the answers that everyone, including himself, so desperately sought. As he began the long and painful road to physical recovery, he became the human face of the tragedy, a reluctant symbol, besieged by media requests and watched by a world hungry for his story. But his story was one of profound and complicated loss. He had not only lost his beloved brother, but also his own sense of normalcy and peace.
His survival was a stark and lonely testament to the sheer randomness of fate. A reminder that in a disaster of this magnitude, the line between life and death can be measured in inches, a matter of pure, inexplicable chance. His journey forward would be one of learning to live with the ghosts of Flight 171.
The crash of Flight 171 was not a distant news story for them. It was a permanent part of their history, a ghost that would haunt their streets and their memories for years to come, forever linking their quiet neighborhood to one of modern aviation's most profound and disturbing mysteries. Children were afraid of the sound of planes overhead. Adults struggled with the traumatic memories of what they had seen and heard. For the residents of Naroda, the scars of that day would be slow to heal. The empty lots where homes once stood, the lingering smell of the fire, the constant presence of investigators, all served as daily reminders of the horror that had fallen from the sky. The crash had brought unimaginable darkness, but in its shadow, the brightest lights of compassion and human solidarity shone through, a defiant act of community against chaos. This collective response was a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of tragedy. It showcased a city that, while wounded and in shock, refused to be broken. Volunteers organized blood donation drives and collected supplies for those who had lost everything. Gurdwaras, temples, and mosques opened their doors, offering food, water, and shelter to the displaced families and exhausted rescue workers. The local community response was immediate and overwhelming. The tragedy had torn a hole in the fabric of the city, and its people came to bear witness, to offer comfort, and to try to make sense of the senseless. It was a place where strangers stood side by side, united in their shock and sorrow. The air, once thick with the smoke of the crash, was now filled with the scent of flowers and the sound of quiet weeping. People came from all over the city, leaving bouquets of marigolds, lighting incense sticks, and placing handwritten notes and photographs of the victims. A makeshift memorial sprang up near the perimeter of the crash site, a spontaneous outpouring of public grief. In the days that followed, the neighborhood became a place of pilgrimage and mourning. In addition to the 260 souls lost on the aircraft, several people on the ground were killed or injured, their homes and livelihoods obliterated in an instant. Residents who had been going about their morning routines were suddenly witnesses to an unimaginable horror, their lives violently intersecting with the final moments of the doomed flight.
The Naroda neighborhood, where the plane came down, was a densely populated area of homes, small businesses, and schools. The impact site was a fresh, gaping wound in the heart of their community. The crash of Flight 171 was not just an international incident, it was a deeply personal tragedy for the city of Ahmedabad.
This act of remembrance helped reclaim the humanity of the victims. The passengers and crew would be remembered not for how they died, but how they lived. Friends, family, and even strangers shared memories and photographs. Their loss was a stark reminder that the passengers were in the midst of living full, meaningful, and hopeful lives. It was an act of defiance against the anonymity of mass tragedy. The newlywed couple, Fiongal and Jamie Greenlaw Meek, became a particularly poignant symbol of the tragedy. Friends and family remembered them as a vibrant, kind, and deeply in love couple. Their stories underscored the immense human cost of the tragedy.
Each name on the manifest represented a universe of lost potential, love, and connection. The stories that emerged painted a rich and diverse tapestry of humanity. They were people with faces, names, and stories.
They are left with the void, a space filled with sorrow and enduring memory. The world moves on, but the aftermath is unending. It is there in the empty chair, in the birthdays uncelebrated, in the phone that never rings. The mystery means their grief is forever entwined with a question unanswered. Years later, the grief remains. The legal battles were another grueling chapter, their lives dedicated to preventing future tragedies. Theirs was a fight born of immense pain. This lack of explanation prevented them from finding peace. The official report offered no closure, leaving them in perpetual uncertainty. For the families, the crash was the beginning of a lifelong journey of grief and advocacy. The story of Air India Flight 171 concludes with a profound and unsettling silence. It is a chilling reminder that even our most sophisticated machines can never be entirely free of mystery. The investigation peeled back layers only to find a core of impenetrable ambiguity. The crash left a scar on the hearts of hundreds of families, a wound held open by the lack of a definitive explanation. The central enigma remains the final dialogue captured in the cockpit, echoing through the years. Why did you do the cutoff? I didn't.
The tragedy is not just in the loss of 260 lives, but in the loss of certainty itself. Flight 171 challenges the very foundations of our faith in aviation. The search for answers continues in the quiet contemplation of what went wrong. It is the weight of an unanswered question, a void that no amount of time can ever truly fill. Some mysteries may be destined to remain forever lost in the darkness.
As we close, let us remember the 260 souls lost on Air India Flight 171. Their journey ended too soon, but their story echoes. They have forced the industry to confront difficult questions, creating a legacy of vigilance. They sought meaning in loss by working to prevent others from suffering the same fate. The legacy is also carried forward by the sole survivor and the families who became advocates. Remembrance keeps their individual lights from being extinguished, ensuring they are known for the lives they lived. The most enduring legacy of Air India Flight 171 is the imperative to remember.